One in four people in the United States now have a diagnosable mental health disorder, serious enough to interfere with their ability to function. And among people from 18 to 25 years old, it's one in three now.
Wow.
So this is really serious. It sounds so horrible and so dire, but it's also really empowering because if you know what's causing it, you have it in your power to undo it. And it's not easy, but it's simple and it doesn't cost you anything. In fact, will save you money in the long run. And within days to weeks, you will notice a difference. If you already have some depression, anxiety, attention issues, memory problems, whatever it is, how much of those problems might be due to your diet? And the only way to answer that question is to find out for yourself. See what's possible for you. If your depression doesn't go away, okay, then maybe it wasn't your diet. But I will say 8 or 9 times out of 10, it is. And so I don't have a randomized controlled trial to tell you that. I just have, hundreds of patients that I've worked with to tell you that. But I think it's really worth a try.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny you mentioned that about the spices because my mom actually got me for Christmas a book called Most Delicious Poisons. And it's all about the different spices and how these are actually the most toxic part of the plant. And that's why they have such a strong flavor. Our brain is
Yes.
that sends a signal and our brain sees that chemical and your brain just goes, no, don't eat this. Then that's why it's a strong, strong flavor. Get this out, spit it out. And it was a very funny take on that. I thought that was good. You mentioned processed foods as well. What in particular about processed foods is so harmful? Obviously, we can process foods in many different ways, and ground beef is processed foods. What is it about the ultra processed foods that actually makes them harmful?
Yeah. So one of the things I explore in the book is I kind of let's process the word process, and because anytime you do anything to a plant or animal, you're processing, right? If you're chopping it up, or if you're cooking it, or if you're fermenting it, if you're whatever you're doing to it is processing. Most animals don't process foods before they eat them; they just swallow them. But we do all kinds of things to our food first. So the difference between good processing and bad processing, I think, or acceptable levels of processing versus unacceptable levels of processing, is whether that processing brings a net risk or net benefit to human health. So one could argue that certain foods, especially if, depending on the source, might need to be cooked to be safe in case there might be bacteria on the surface, or that if you cook, especially plant foods, if you cook them, you can make some of their nutrients more available to you. You can make them somewhat less toxic. So fermenting can, again, make certain nutrients more available and make plant foods less toxic, that sort of thing. So those sort of traditional processing methods that we've, been using for long, long period of time, there was a logic behind those. They were making those foods less harmful, more nutritious to us, or they're making them more shelf stable, right? So, for example, salting and curing.
Right.
So that type of processing could be beneficial, depending on the food. But modern processing methods, that require industrial plants and factories and things like that, that level of processing is all risk and no benefit. So what you're doing with processing, especially when you're creating a refined carbohydrate like a sugar or a syrup or a crystal, or you're creating a refined fat like vegetable oil, what you're doing is you're essentially stripping that source food of all of its nutrients and concentrating the most harmful ingredient. So it's one thing to eat a piece of fruit or a root vegetable. It's another thing to eat pure sugar that comes from a root vegetable like a beet. It's one thing to eat a nut that has some linoleic acid in it, which is the omega-6 fatty acid, which is so high in vegetable oil. It's another thing to pour concentrated source of linoleic acid over all the food you eat. Mayonnaise and salad dressings and marinades and things like that. So this degree of processing is all risk and no benefit. So the signature ingredients, there are many potentially harmful ingredients in processed foods, emulsifiers and stabilizers and thickeners and all kinds of things and flavors and colors. But the lion's share of what we really need to worry about in so-called ultra-processed foods are the refined carbohydrates and the refined fats. So I think the vegetable oils, the sugar, the flour, the cereal products, the fruit juices, all of those, and this is, I say this in the book, this is, if you do nothing else, please at least remove those, because refined carbohydrates and refined vegetable oils are direct and powerful promoters of inflammation and oxidative stress in the brain. So these are what are disrupting our brain chemistry. These are what are destabilizing our brain chemistry, causing the neurotransmitters to go out of balance, causing the brain to be damaged from the inside out, causing these advanced glycation end products, these kind of sticky, dysfunctional molecules. There's too much sugar in your brain, that will caramelize very important proteins and other kinds of components in your brain and gum up the works. And your brain's immune system will try to clear those away by mounting an inflammatory response and generating free radicals to deliberately create oxidative stress. So if you're eating this way 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day, which now most people are, which is, heartbreaking, or maybe I should say brain breaking, this is really dangerous. And most people eat this way. Most people are destroying their brains from the inside out without realizing it, and then wondering why they don't feel well. Why it's not just 1 in 4 people, at least in the United States anyway. I don't know the figures for Australia, but 1 in 4 people in the United States now have a diagnosable mental health disorder, serious enough to interfere with their ability to function. And among people from 18 to 25 years old, it's 1 in 3 now.
Wow.
So this is really serious. And it sounds so horrible and so dire, but it's also really empowering, because if you know what's causing it, you have it in your power to undo it. And it's not easy, but it's simple, and it doesn't cost you anything. In fact, will save you money in the long run. And within days to weeks, you will notice a difference. And I think it's really, really worth it for people to understand how exactly those foods, I spell this out in the book because I don't want it to be mysterious. This is how this works. And so if you can picture that happening, every time you're pouring salad dressing on your salad that's, loaded with soybean oil, every time you are eating, a cookie or a bowl of cereal or a sweetened yogurt, imagine your brain under attack every time you do that. And so the less you do that, the better off you'll be.
Yeah. And yeah, well, that's just very good advice for anyone. Just you cut out those ultra processed foods and those specific, the ultra processed carbohydrates, refined sugars and carbs and seed oils. As far as linoleic acid goes, the omega-3, the omega-6s and polyunsaturated fats. Obviously this is what people have been telling us to eat for 50 years now. This is what you are supposed to eat. You're supposed to get rid of saturated fat. You're supposed to eat these unsaturated fats. Why are these so harmful? And when these good, wonderful humanitarians all want us to eat it.
Yeah, it's just a marvel of marketing to me. It's just when you look at the truth about vegetable oil and linoleic acid, there's no question that this is not only completely unnecessary molecule to be taking in any amount. We don't need a single molecule of linoleic acid. We are told that it's an essential fatty acid. It is not essential. We're told that we need to eat linoleic acid, which is the nut and seed oils are very, very high in linoleic. Many of them are very high in linoleic acid. We're told that that's good for us, because it's not saturated. We could go down that. We could talk about that for a half an hour. But not just that it's not saturated, but it's actually essential and good for you and will reduce your risk for heart disease, right? All ridiculous. And so the reason why it's ridiculous is linoleic acid. Let's look at what it is. It's a very long polyunsaturated omega-6 fatty acid that is naturally found in small amounts in all plant and animal foods, really, right? So it's widespread. We are equipped to be able to see a small amount of it, but we certainly are not equipped to sort of be pouring it all over all of our food all day long. So linoleic acid is a very fragile fatty acid which you basically look at it the wrong way and it falls apart, right? So it's oxidative stress. And so if you've got any oxidative stress going on in your body, that's going to oxidize the linoleic acid. And then that leads to a chain reaction of further oxidative stress. So it itself is becoming more and more oxidized, as are the molecules around it. So you get this chain reaction of oxidative stress, free radicals running amok. You can think of them as like little bulls in a china shop that are kind of randomly damaging everything they bump into. And this is not good. So now there's a lot, this is pretty new science in terms of looking at the potential dangers of linoleic acid. Is a relatively new field. But before I get to that, let me come back to why they say it's essential. So why are we told this is an essential molecule? We're told it's essential because we need it to build arachidonic acid. Arachidonic acid is an omega-6 fatty acid that the brain actually needs. That's the fatty acid the brain actually needs. And arachidonic acid you can get from animal foods. So if you're eating animal foods, you do not need to eat a single molecule of linoleic acid. If you're not eating animal foods, okay, maybe you might need a linoleic acid, but you don't need very much, first of all. And second of all, if you have too much linoleic acid in your diet, the very early science is beginning to show that linoleic acid does cross the blood-brain barrier. It gets absorbed into the brain just like any other polyunsaturated fatty acid does. So the omega-3s obviously have to cross the blood-brain barrier. So do omega-6s, because the brain needs omega-6 in the form of arachidonic acid. When the brain absorbs linoleic acid, it seems to really not know what to do with it. So instead of turning it into arachidonic acid, which is why we're told we're supposed to eat it, the vast majority of that linoleic acid gets burned for energy. You don't want that. The brain is not supposed to be burning fatty acids for energy. The brain is supposed to be burning smaller molecules, not these long fats that create a lot of oxidative stress and inflammation in the process of chopping them up. You want small molecules like glucose and ketones to be burned in the brain. When you burn too much fatty acid in the brain, you will get excessive inflammation and oxidative stress. So again, you don't want this. Now, I think that since there's no earthly reason to consume linoleic acid, wouldn't you want to play it safe, even though the science is still emerging about how dangerous this actually is and what problems it might actually cause? While you're waiting for all the scientists to figure this out, why not just take it out of your diet? It's an ultra refined oil that comes from oil refineries. There's nothing natural about it. I put in the book exactly, if you wanted to try to make this at home, how you would attempt to do this in 13 easy steps that require, by the way, an explosive solvent named hexane. So you really be careful that, you could have a serious kitchen accident if you tried this at home. This is not a natural fat. It has no flavor. It has no color. It's not a food. And if anybody's really curious about linoleic acid and vegetable oils and how we got here to this ridiculous upside down view of fats, if you haven't already read Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz, it is a wonderful exploration of the science and the politics and the history of how we got here. There's a chapter in the book called The Plant-Based Brain, which explains exactly what happens if you don't have animal foods in the diet when the brain is developing, to try to help people understand how dangerous this is. And you don't hear that. In mainstream messaging about plant-based diets, you never hear the